Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The ceremony is about to begin.
This is very real.
Fantastic.
This drug is dangerous.
Wrong.
You cannot play with it. It's not funny. It's not something to laugh about. Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Shut your little punk ass up.
But the more you hate me, the more you will learn.
Hey, you guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Autoflower Podcast. This is episode 33. Man, one of my favorite numbers. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm glad to be here with you right now in this moment. This episode is going to be cool. We're going to be doing a Mythbusters sort of episode here with full Duplex. So what we're doing is I kind of went through some common myths or misconceptions about autoflowers and got Dan's responses on them all, kind of clear up some fogginess that may still be lingering around in the modern world of autoflowers, if that's what you want to call it. But we got to keep in mind that years ago a lot of these myths may have been very true. So genetics have come a long way, but sometimes people don't catch on to that and they don't see that, and that's okay. But it's nice to talk about it, to kind of get a modern view on it from someone like Full Duplex, who I really respect, and we can help clear up some of that old myth, so to speak. So before we get into the conversation, of course, as usual, I just want to invite you guys to follow the podcast on Instagram at Autoflower Podcast. You can also like the Facebook page if you'd like. Not sure how much longer I'll even personally be on Facebook, to be honest with you. But there is a Facebook page right now if you want to get plugged in there. And there's also a Twitter account at Autoflower Pod if you prefer that. So let's get right into this. Man, I hope you guys enjoy this. I sure did. So let's welcome back to the Autoflower Podcast fan favorite, Mr. Full Duplex. So yeah, dude, I just thought it'd be cool to kind of go through and just cover some common myths, even if they're like really common, because I still personally get like some pretty common questions, which is okay.
That's great. That means people are trying to learn.
The general simple question. So, I thought it would be good, even if it's really simple for some, to still go through, I guess, for more beginners and stuff, and kind of myth bust some of the stuff that surrounds autoflowers. You know what I mean?
I do. There's still a lot of that out there. And I mean, I feel there's a lot of old mentality that's still being portrayed with the autoflower. And, with anything new, that's to be expected. But, I think that they're starting to make a push forward. And I think I agree. Let's try to squash out some of that stuff that people have heard and try to, balance out some of the questions that we hear.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on something that I've heard actually lately that I've kind of heard more on Facebook and stuff, but in these groups, but just the fact that, or the myth that autoflowering strains or autoflowers in particular are less potent than photoperiods. What do you think about that, man?
I think it's a hodgepodge, honestly. I mean, do I think they're less potent? No. Do I think they have the equivalency? Yes. In all honesty, the modern autoflower that we see today has been quite successful in competing with, THC and CBD, CBG, and other cannabinoid numbers. You see a lot of these 31 and 32% strains coming out of photoperiod, and that's fantastic and all. But what you don't see is the people putting up the numbers of 21, 22, 27, 29% autoflowers. And I think personally, a lot of that is lost in the recreational market for an uneducated consumer. Everybody wants these high THC numbers, and sometimes there's a lot of other things that are lacking, rather than just the high THC. So I personally have always believed it's not always about the high THC number, that it's the synergy of everything that's, consumed from the plant. So, I would venture to say that people should venture beyond just looking at the number when they pick up a package in a rec market.
Yeah.
I think, not that that's, skewed, but I think people should, try to expand upon what other cannabinoids are available from that plant that could benefit them either medicinally or even recreationally.
Yeah. I also think that like you kind of have to define what we mean by potent, because if you're just going off THC percentages and stuff, then that could be misleading, because there's some strains where like the THC will be low, maybe even, down in the high teens. And low according to today's standards.
Right.
But but if the terpene profile is just twisted or mixed in some certain magical formula, that thing could be pretty potent.
Well, and I've
with all
experienced
of
that
those
personally.
things working together. You know what I mean? So you can't. That's what you're saying, right? Like you can't just go in and just look at like what's this percentage of this one single cannabinoid, and judge. I mean, you can to an extent.
Right.
But there is more that goes into it than that. So when we say like potent, it's like, well, you got to describe what you mean by potent.
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. And like I've had stuff that's been like 30% THC and be okay, where something that was like 22% THC or even like 15 to 18% THC with a whole other broad spectrum of cannabinoids just absolutely melt my face. To the point where it's like, whoa, and wreck your day, unexpectedly.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And I think a lot of that too has to do with like, let's say like for me, for example, dude, like, I was buying, before I started growing, I was purchasing from a dispensary. So when I started growing and then I harvested my first plant, it wasn't nothing near like what I was buying from the dispensary, like my first couple of grows. So like if you're a new grower and you're growing and you harvest and you're like, oh, this isn't as good, like don't beat yourself up over it. It might not be that the autoflower sucks. It might be the genetics. It could be, but it also could be that you're just still learning too, so don't go so hard on yourself and just knock off autoflowers altogether because of it.
Yeah, and I agree. And a lot of that, comes back to the dry and cure process. A lot of things that, go into proper cultivation is a simple fact of, yeah, it's easy. You can grow it great. It looks great on the plant. And then you could ruin your whole crop or, not have a potent quote unquote crop if you wreck your whole dry and cure process. It's a very important process that I think that takes a long time to master. So I agree with you. Don't get down on yourself, especially if you're a first time grower. Don't get down on yourself. Keep trying. Find a way to be better at the process where you feel that you may have failed at. And I think when people can get a more rounded grow, may that start from the seedling stage all the way through the dry cure process. Once they achieve that, they're going to start seeing that they're going to benefit from either cultivar, whether it be a photoperiod strain or an autoflower strain.
Yeah, totally. That was a good answer, man.
Oh, well, thank you.
Sorry if you heard me that sound. I was throwing a freaking pin cap at a box to get one of those crickets to shut up.
Well, I was wondering either that or you tripped over something, one of the two.
Yeah. What do you think about the myth or the claim that, I think it's a myth, autoflowering strains produce low yields?
I'm going to go ahead and call bullshit. That may be a bold statement, but I've seen high yielding strains personally and from, outside third parties. I believe at this point where they're at now, 5-10 years ago, potentially, they could have potentially had a less yield due to the fact of a fast flower cycle, the ability for them to be stunted and, several other factors that play into it. But nowadays with, the autoflowers where they're at, I think they can yield the same, if not better. And, one of the things that, we've talked about a couple times is that commercial farms are starting to use them to provide bumper crops. And you don't get a bumper crop without a big yield. That's the whole reason why they call it that. And, I think they can yield just equally the same, if not more, depending on cultivar, obviously,
right.
As a photoperiod. Again, it comes back to what you said earlier, and that's genetics. The the time spent on the genetics, the work that's been put into the genetics, even the background of the genetics. I've got several cultivars of my own, and inside those cultivars, I see yield differences. And, it's all about practicing and discipline and providing genetics that put that out there rather than just forcing out something new. And I think they have a very, very competitive place in the market as far as yield goes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it really depends too on like your grow setup. And like when I was using like CFL bulbs when I really first started growing, like, dude, I didn't really hardly get any yields, you know what I mean? And when I switched to like a blurple, it increased a lot. And then when I switched to that blurple to a more efficient like cob LED light, I got even more. And I know the strains have a lot to do with that too, but there are some strains that just really don't grow like extremely huge, like a lot of the autoflowers that we see some people harvesting. It's not like they're all 8 feet tall, but I think a lot of it too is a lot of people are growing indoors for personal use, and at least I am. And I don't necessarily want something that, like, I don't want to harvest like a pound or I don't even really want, to be honest with you. I know it sounds totally ass backwards to the cannabis community, but like I don't really want any more than I consume. Because I noticed like after about a year, like I've had some that I've let go for like a year, and I'm probably not storing it right and drying it and curing it all pristine, but it just kind of is not as good anymore. I just, it's like coffee, dude. Like I prefer like when it's freshly roasted, you know what I mean? So I like to kind of blow through it and use it and go on to a next strain and use that and go and have some diversity. And so I like the smaller yields. I like getting, 2-3 ounces off of a plant is plenty for me. And growing a couple plants at a time. So, but some of them, like even some of the strains I've grown, they've gotten big, and, like your Bobby's Widow outgrew my tent. The Purple Microdot outgrew my tent. What do you think about as far as yields and time frames? Like if one strain finishes in 60 days and another finishes in 90, do you think that one that finishes 90 is going to have more automatically, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. It comes back to the several factors that you mentioned, lighting being the biggest one, and, the way that you're feeding that plant. I don't necessarily think a 90-day plant is going to be as a heavier yielder than a 60-day plant if that 60-day plant has got the genetic code to pump out that yield in that short time frame. I think that really comes back to the genetic code. It really does. We've seen some monsters that are grown in 60, 75-day range, and then we see some absolute huge plants that are grown in the 90 to 100-day range. Now, typically what I've seen is the ones that go to the 90 to 100 days, they're going to have more yield because they get bigger. They have a bigger structure. They get a bigger frame. They have more bud sites and flower sites than something that's going to grow in 60 days or 70 days. And you could potentially get a bigger yield out of those, but I don't think it always correlates to the same. I don't think that a longer day plant or a longer running plant is going to give you more yield if your light is subpar or your nutrient schedule is subpar. I think it all depends on the grow. Yeah.
I noticed too that like the more experience I get and stuff, like the better I get in the vegetation stage, you know what I mean, of autoflowers, because it's like there's that window where if you can really kind of dial it in and like really good and provide, what you can to let the plant do the best that it can. I don't know if I said that right. That sounded dumb, but you get what I'm saying?
I do.
Yeah.
The vegetative stage of an auto is very imperative. There's a lot of things that can go right. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. One of the things that can go wrong is obviously stunting. You either overwater or you underwater. If you underwater, let me start there. Underwatering, I think, is more devastating than overwatering because you create dry pockets in the soil. And then those roots have a limited space, even though you may have a 5-gallon bucket or a 5-gallon cloth pot or a 5-gallon plastic pot, whatever your container consists of. If you've got dry pockets in there, you're limiting the root space of that auto. So that's one phase that you could impact that growth in. Another phase that you can impact it in, of course, is overwatering. And of course, that's going to slow it down because, you starve the root zone of the oxygen that it needs to provide proper nutrient uptake to that plant. And so both of those, there's a happy medium that you need to meet in that vegetative stage to produce an auto that's going to actually produce yield for you. And you said that, the community may hate you, but it's not always about yield. I always recommend to somebody who's a new grower to, grow the plant well the first time, understand, and I'm sure that most of the people that have listened to this have heard me say it before, is understand the mechanics. And, understanding that vegetative stage and getting it to where exactly it needs in that stage, I think is imperative to the yield that an auto is going to produce, whether it be a 60-day strain, whether it be a 100-day strain.
Yeah. I want to just, if I can, hit the pause button really quick here. And I just want to zoom in on this watering thing just for a second, because it reminded me of something. There goes that cricket. When you water, and it's a seedling, do you suggest in soil watering the entire pot or just out around the edges of that seedling?
So me personally, what I like to do, so we'll go for an example. We'll say a 3-gallon pot. What I like to do is I will soak that 3-gallon pot till runoff, and I'll wait, and I'll put that pot in the grow environment that plant's going to survive in. And after about 2 days, I'll then put the seed in the soil. So I saturate, to answer your question, I saturate that entire 3 gallons till runoff. And then the nice thing about that is, for the first few days, if you're using organics, or for the first week or so, if you're using organics, you don't need to touch that plant. You don't need to add water. You don't need to feed it. You don't need to do anything to it, because it's going to have everything it needs, because that pot is so saturated with water that it can just grow out, and it can push those roots out to find those water zones. It eliminates all the dry spots. It eliminates the potential for overwater. So what I would recommend is, if you're gonna germinate in the final pot that it's going to grow in, which I thoroughly recommend for autoflowers, I would saturate that pot till runoff, and then plant that seed and let it germinate, and then wait 2 weeks before you even try to water again. And the only caveat to that is, I would say, if you're using cloth pots or those air pruning pots that have got the exposed outer layer, maybe a week and a half, because you've got that exposed area that is going to get dried up from the environment. If you're in a hard-walled pot, like a solid plastic pot, 2 weeks is probably golden, maybe even 2.5.
Okay. So when you water again after that 2 weeks or whatever it is, do you water the whole pot again?
Typically what I do, so if it's a 3-gallon pot, what I will do after that 2 weeks is take a straight up solo cup that we're all familiar with, fill it up with water, which is 16 ounces, I think. I can't remember what they are.
I think it is something like, or 12. Or that's 16, I think.
No, 18.
18.
Anywhere between 16 and 18. I'm looking at the square solo cup. So if you're using a round solo cup, it's probably going to be 16 ounces. The square solo cups use 18 ounces. But after the 2 week mark, I will fill up one of those, pour it across the entire top of that pot, and then let it sort itself out. I don't, water a specific ring. I don't water the outside edges. I just pour that in and let that soak down into the pot.
Oh, okay. Even now, dude, I still get confused because I hear different things, but it's like, because I used to just water on the outside of my seedling a little bit and leave the rest of the dirt dry. Right. And I wouldn't water a whole lot, but I think that caused me to have some really small plants because I wasn't letting that root zone expand and seek out and get to all that other water in other parts of the soil.
Exactly. And what happens with that is you're creating dry pockets on the outside. If you're one of the ones that wants to water, gently on a pot after 2 weeks, and if you feel the need to water in a ring, my suggestion is water the outsides all the way up against the edge of the pots. If you're using cloth pots, come in about 1 inch. If you're using, plastic pots, water against the outside wall. And what that'll do is that'll cause those roots to seek out that water. And not only that, it causes a reverse osmosis, environment where if there's dry soil between where the seedling's sitting in the center to the outside wall, that dry soil is going to suck up that water.
Ah, okay. Okay. And of course, we're talking about being in soil, because if you're in cocoa, you're going to be keeping that stuff saturated at all times.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, man. Thanks for clearing that up. All right. Unpause. Let's zoom back out to our Mythbusters.
Okay.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt. I want to let you know about the sponsor of today's episode, My Herbs Now, the creator of the Herbs Now dryer. Safe, consistent drying is key. And if you want to save time, space, ramp up production, or even sample a part of your plant, then the Herbs Now cannabis dryer is for you. It's a great alternative to traditional drying. Visit myherbsnow.com today to browse the packages on their online store.
So what do you think? So you kind of just touched on it, and I've got kind of a new opinion on this as well, but well, not a new one, but what do you think about transplanting, about not starting in the final pot?
I've had some different experiences this summer. Currently, I've done direct germ and I've done a transplant into my hugelkultur, and I've actually done a phased transplant where I have taken some that have kind of gotten bigger than what I'd like to transplant and some that are a little bit smaller. And I think transplanting is okay as long as you catch it early enough. So if you start in a solo cup, one of the recommendations I always make is transplant it before those first set of leaves touch or reach out to the side of the solo cup.
Mm-hmm.
If they reach the side of the solo cup, I do believe you're going to have a smaller plant. And the reason I say that is I watched what happened outside this year. I had two phases. One where I let them get a little bit bigger. It was a little bit out of control because of time and life. And then another phase that was a little bit younger when I did the transplant. And the younger ones who didn't reach the outside of the soil or the outside of the solo cup are actually bigger. To give you an example, I've got 4 of them that are about 3 foot tall, and I've got 2 of them that are pushing 5 foot tall, and I got one that's like almost 6.5 foot tall.
Damn.
Because I got them out there later, theoretically, and they weren't as, lack of a better term, root bound by the solo cup.
Right. Yeah, I've kind of found that, like, if you can be a total boss and transplant, like, at the right moment without really disturbing the roots, and you kind of nail it, and because I feel like I did that when I was in cocoa. Like, I kind of nailed it right at the right time, but I think being in cocoa helped it out because you're like fertigating multiple times a day. At least I was at the beginning.
Right.
And I think and I think I timed it so perfectly just by accident, to be honest with you, that I think it worked out okay. But that was my indoor grow that I was doing, that I tested that out with. Now my outdoor, I had a different experience. So I do, but I learned that from you on an old episode, that, when those outer leaves start to touch the outer circumference of that solo cup, that then your roots are probably starting to circle and stuff in there. What I did is, like, as soon as they get to the edges, or right before they got to the edges, I transplanted them, and they were okay. Like, they did okay, but there was several other ones, probably 8 other ones, that I was being lazy, and I waited another week to transplant them. And when I did, dude, they hardly got any bigger, and they totally stunted. And I think it's because I waited too long, and I was pulling the roots out of a cloth pot too. It's on some of them. So I think that really messed the roots up too. So I think I stunted those. So I think it's like, if you can nail it at the right time and be real gentle and not disturb those roots, it's almost like I think you could probably pull it off. But I think for now on, for me, I'm going to try to start in the final pots just so I don't accidentally do anything. You know what I mean?
I do. And there was a farm in, I want to say Massachusetts this year, that did a test, and they took my direct soil, direct germ transplant, or direct germ, and they did transplant. And they actually showed me the tap roots and the difference between the two, between transplanting them, which they started in, I think, either solo cups or 4-inch square pots, mm-hmm. and actually direct germing. And the direct germing was a bigger tap root, was a more robust tap root versus the stunted tap root that was in the actual solo cup. The plants were actually bigger that they did the direct germ to.
Interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. It makes sense though.
I mean, it does. I mean, like, more modern day autoflowers are a little bit more tolerant to the transplant than what they used to be, again, 5-10 years ago. But the ones that we see nowadays tend to be, a little bit more forgiving when you do the transplant. So that window that we're talking about, the one you said, you nailed it right at the right time by luck, I think it's been extended, or not just extended, but maybe they're more resilient to the transplant.
What about topping? Let's talk about that. I know we've kind of touched on that before, but that is, man, still such a debated subject. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy around that.
Yeah.
And again, another test I did this summer, and I swear it wasn't for preparation for this podcast. It was for my own understanding is, topping, if you do it right at the right time and early enough, I think it's fine. Like I did one, I topped directly above the second node of the ALF number 5 family line. And she is absolutely robust. Is she as tall as the rest of the group? No. But she has 4 identical branches that are coming up that are going to produce, I believe, way more than what she would have done if she would have been grown al natural. So, yeah, I think topping, even mainlining or manifolding, because mainlining sounds like a heroin injection, and I don't like that.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But, manifolding, I think it could definitely benefit on auto if you do it at the right time. And the right time, from what I have seen, has been right at this sex. So as soon as you identify it as male or female, or you make the transplant, once you get a few days past the transplant, top at second node. I've seen the most robust come in topping at the 4th or 5th node, because that produces multiple colas all the way around the plant. But again, it comes back to that time frame.
Yeah, I agree, man. And also, because I accidentally topped your Bobby's Widow during the stretch. That's a big no-no too. If try not to top it during the stretch. But what I've noticed is some of the strains that grow taller and have more more legs, so to speak, and kind of more space in between, internodal spacing and stuff. Those kind of work out good for me when I top them indoors, just to kind of even out the canopy and stuff under the grow lights, so that, you know what I mean, dude? Because when you're outdoors, it's like I don't have to worry about that. Like the sun gets those lower nodes just as much as it does that cola, dude. Because that sun is so damn powerful. So the sun, when you're outdoors, because when I top, it's for a different reason. When I top a lot indoors. But it's for, I either want to get like a sea of green, like even canopy, if I know it's going to be a tall plant, so I can get the lowers more light, because when you got that light, it's hard to get and even grow in that sense.
And exactly, like one of the things that I've noticed about, like you said, with the outdoor growth is like even the side nodes, the lower branching is maturing along the same rate as one of the upper nodes is, or as the main cola coming up out of the center, because that sun is so more powerful. And I think, indoors topping is even more beneficial when it comes to the auto.
Yeah, man. I just, I love topping too, just to kind of, I like messing around, dude. It's fun. It's fun I love doing the manifold too, the main line. I've only done it a couple of times, but, I sure do love it, man. I like watching some of these guys on Instagram, like Greasy Greens and Green 75. They grow some like beastly looking monster plants they're just all colas. That's what I like about it. It's all colas just shooting up, Oh,
I do.
Doing that manifold technique. It's really cool to watch, but I think it's just a really good solution for indoors. I don't know why I'm so stuck on that, just because the light, it's just, you get so much more intensity. If you're putting your light 18 inches above your highest part of the plant and your cola is like 10 inches higher than your lowers, then your lowers aren't getting that much light. You know what I mean?
I do.
And so, like I said, like outdoors, you don't have to worry about that, but indoors you do. So that's where I like to kind of get more of an even thing, to where I'm not giving all of my intense lighting to just this one center cola, and that's it. So that's kind of my take on it anyways.
Well, and I think it's imperative for an indoor grow. I mean, a lot of the guys, a lot of the home growers right now are still growing inside tents. And one thing that a lot of autos like to do, especially if you top them, is they like to take that side branching and do what you said. They like to bring it up to that canopy. Mm-hmm. And when they bring it up to that canopy, the reflectiveness from the tents and everything, it just becomes a more beneficial environment for that auto to grow in. Whereas, like you said, outdoor, you've got that sun beating in on it. So it doesn't need topped as much. I mean, a lot of people, from what my experience has been, is people just love to top. Photo periods, I see it all the time. I mean, I do a lot of I do it a lot with my photos in my greenhouse and stuff like that. But I encourage people to, if you feel the need to top, that's fine. But also, if you're growing outdoor, let an auto finish in its natural state, just to show you, the structure of what it actually can do without being topped.
Yeah. Yeah, I do like to let them go natural too. That's like the enjoyment of and the variety of growing. All these different techniques you can try, and it's cool, man. It's cool to do different things and test it out.
Exactly. It's fun to explore. It's fun to try a new avenue, something new, maybe even increase your yield or just understand the plant better.
Yeah. Yeah. And man, like quite a few of the strains that I've topped, like they just keep going, dude. Like they don't, sometimes I'll notice like a 2 or 3 day, like kind of stagnant thing, but for the most part, like I'll top one and, it'll just keep going. It'll just divert that energy to those other branches and just keep on trucking.
Well, yeah, because it forces those hormones to those other branches. And once those hormones get there, it realizes that that's where it needs to force its energy. And once it forces its energy there, it starts pushing everything outside.
Right. What about this one? Actually, this kind of seems ridiculous. I'm just on Google and like looking up autoflower myths and just spitting them out to you. But this one's funny. Autoflowering strains need 24-hour light cycles. They need them.
So do they need them? No. Can they flower under them? Yes. I come back to the Calvin cycle for the dark period. And if you feel the need to run 24 hours, by all means. But I also believe that you are taking away from that plant a very crucial cycle to the photosynthesis process. And that's the Calvin cycle, where the extra carbon bonds with the plant. You know what I mean? Like that dark cycle is crucial in any kind of growing plant's needs. Some people claim they see bigger yields from 24 hours. I personally have never seen that. You run, back when I was running tents and not an open room, one tent I would grow at 24 hours. One tent I would grow at 18.6 or 20 on, 4 off. And the ones that were grown in 18.6 and the 20 on and 4 off would yield more than the 24 hours would. And I believe that's due to the Calvin cycle.
Interesting. Yeah, because what's crazy, man, is when I grow outdoors, it's like, even if there's only like maybe 8 hours of direct sunlight, but even if it's like, 13, 14, 15 hours of day, they still grow, dude. Yep. They still just shoot, man. They stretch fast. They still do their thing. It's amazing. And then I see some of these guys throwing autos in these little nooks and crannies in their tents while they're vegging their photos. And then when they flip them, they just leave the autos in there.
Yep.
And some of these guys are growing autos on 12-12. I mean, they're probably not, obviously. I would imagine that would really kind of reduce your yield, but
it does impact yield.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm just saying though, it's like if you're just taking up space, if you're just like, well, I got a square foot open right there, I'm gonna throw an autoflower over there.
Might as well.
It's like it doesn't matter if you're vegging or if you're in flower, you can still grow one. You know what I mean? Like, and that might not be huge, but you know what I mean? I've noticed. I don't want to say I've noticed, but I think, and someone said this before, and I forget who, but they seem to be more healthy when you give them a dark period. Like it's not like I've done any scientific studies of this stuff, but And maybe I'm being deceived or deceiving myself, but I'm pretty sure, dude, like when I was running 24-hour light cycles, because I did do that for quite a while, it seemed like I ran into more problems. Like, I don't know, maybe because it wasn't getting that downtime. What do you think?
I would agree. I think the plant needs to get some rest. I see better health underneath my 20 and 18 6-hour on cycles than I'd ever done under the 24-hour cycles.
Yeah.
Is it a direct correlation? I have no idea. Just like you, I've never done any kind of scientific experiment and wrote it down on paper and created a white paper and had it tested. But I see healthier results from a dark cycle in their lifetime.
Yeah. And you know what else? Like we've talked about this before too, but some people will make the argument that because it's an autoflower ruderalis, which, comes from the northern hemisphere where there's, the part of the year that it grows, there is no darkness or very little. And we've talked about this before, but it's also not, it's first of all, it's not ruderalis. It's a hybrid of ruderalis indica sativa.
Exactly.
And then second of all, that's not noontime afternoon sun blaring at it 24 hours. That's
right.
Also different. So it's kind of a hard argument to make, in my opinion.
It is and I agree with you 100%. Going back to what you were talking about, the 15 hours of daylight, like right now, the max daylight hours that we get here in where I'm at in Washington is 15 hours and 59 minutes of daylight. And that is at June 21st at the solstice. After that, it starts diminishing, daily. And I'm still seeing actually bigger calyxes from the sun than what I would see underneath indoor growing light, honestly. And that's one thing that I've talked about with a few growers around here, and especially a few of the farms that I've worked with, is the morphology changes on the calyx. Like they're bigger. And I think it has to do with the sun. It's something to do with the sun.
Huh.
Yeah.
I bet you it is. Yeah. It really is amazing the difference that you get between indoor and outdoor, man.
Oh, 100%.
It's crazy. That pollen chuck haze that I harvested, it's curing right now, but it's like, it's so dense, dude. And it's just, I just attribute a lot of it to the sun because I've grown that indoors and it wasn't nearly as dense. And that's because I didn't have, these high tech lights or anything. So it's like you throw one out in the sun and it's like, boom, it's crazy.
Well, and that was the thing that I noticed too when you grew my anvil. The anvil had bigger calyxes on that purple one than I've ever seen indoor.
Yeah, those things were swole, huh?
Yeah, they were definitely swole.
Those are swole, dude. Those are Schwarzenegger style, dude. They were cut. Yeah, dude. They're really swole.
But yeah, they were definitely bigger, and I really do think that the sun plays a factor into that. I think there's a lot of great lighting companies out there, but I don't think any of them quite can mimic what the sun puts off. There's such a broader spectrum, and I think a lot more that we don't understand.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. What about, is there any other myths that you can think of? Is there anything else that you kind of, maybe that bugs you or gets under your skin, or maybe just stuff that you hear about that we didn't cover?
I think the one thing, I don't want to say a myth, but like one thing I would definitely encourage growers to do is germination methods direct to the soil over starting in a paper towel. Germinating in a cup of water is one thing, but like the dangers that you run into with germinating in a paper towel is that taproot becomes attached to that paper towel sometimes. Sometimes we forget about it. Sometimes it grows faster than we expected. Sometimes it germinates faster than we expect. And once that taproot becomes in contact with that paper towel, you have the ability to disturb it, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. And honestly, from what I've seen over the last 3 years, like germinating direct to soil, I've gotten better plants, healthier plants that don't stunt, plants that are more vigorous because they've been germinated directly in the soil. in reality, we're trying to mimic Mother Nature in the first place when we're growing these things, and Mother Nature just drops them off the plant, lets them fall in the soil, they come up on their own. And I've seen better results, higher yields, and more vigorous plants when they just start straight in the soil, whether it be a container or a grow bed or a garden in the backyard. I definitely think that is something that, people growing autos should consider. Another thing would be, I guess, fertilization. Autos, a lot of people are claiming that autos don't need a lot of food, and I agree with that. They don't take a lot, especially because, one of the things we push out here for commercial growers is a lower overhead. They don't take a lot of food in an organic system. If it comes back to, fertigating and cocoa, then of course they're going to take more food and consume more food that way because you're feeding them all the time. They're going to get bigger. Hydro is going to be a little bit different, but from what I've seen in organics, they don't need a whole bunch of food, but if you push them just a little bit with the organics, they tend to work out rather well for you. I've seen some nice big yields. I've seen some 6 and 7 foot plants. One of the most recent farms I've worked with, the average height was 5.5 feet.
Damn, that's pretty good, dude.
Yeah, I was impressed with what I saw when I walked out there. I didn't expect to walk into a greenhouse to see those big of autos.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't even want one that big indoors. I'm cool with having that outdoors, but like indoors, it's like, man, if my light was up 5.5 feet, how much lighter there's lowers getting?
Exactly.
I know. I'm so stuck on that. I'm sorry, dude. I keep coming back around to that.
Oh no, you're good. Well, that's what
it just seems so logical to me. Like it just, if you got like an 8-foot plant indoors and your light's, 8.5 feet or 9 feet off the ground, like all those lowers that are, 4 feet above the ground they're far away from your light. You know what I mean?
I do. No. Yeah. You're right. I mean, they do diminish the light capacity that they take in, and that's where, indoors is coming back into topping.
Yeah. Or just training in general, I guess, but.
Right. Train them a little bit.
Yeah. Train them out and bend her over and give her a little love.
Give her a little TLC, give her a little stroke,
Little tie down.
Little tie down.
And just.
Gag ball. Wait, gag ball. No, never mind.
As always, I freaking appreciate you and your time.
Dude, anytime. You can call me anytime you want to do one of these. I'll talk to you for hours.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. Well, we will soon again, for sure.
Right on.
All right, brother. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, dude. More than willing, if you got any other questions that come up because of this, if people want to dive deeper into a specific subject, let's do it.
Right on, bro. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy.
Well, I hope that was of some sort of benefit to you. I hope that maybe you can walk away with that, learning something new, or maybe if it's just clearing something up, or maybe you're questioning something we said, that's okay too. Because we don't know it all, man, and everybody needs to be able to stand corrected. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. Let me know what you think. Don't forget, you guys, to please just, with everything that's going on right now, man, just think for yourselves. Don't forget to think for yourself. Wherever it is that you are, wherever you land on that political fence, whichever side you're on, regardless, man, just don't forget to think for yourself, and just remember that we're all human and that we all need each other. All right? See you guys.
The weed marijuana is grown in every state in the Union. Recently, in the city of Brooklyn, New York, a field of marijuana was found behind a tenement court. The weed was here being cultivated, regularly stripped and dried and sold in schools and at government army posts in and around New York. The dried leaves and berries are ground up and made into cigarettes by a simple hand machine. The deadly narcotic is thus quickly and easily prepared for its market.